Hey y'all, Shayans here. Welcome to my book talk. So today I'm gonna talk about superhero genre, but in a different way. Because when you think about superheroes, you mostly think about like bright costumes, epic battles, and heroes who are always there for you. But today I wanna show you a different side of this story, of these comics. I'll share 5 books with you that is like suitable for adult readers that flip the superhero genre in a way that you've never seen before. What ties this book together is how they all challenge or humanize the idea of superheroes. They ask tough questions about society, trauma, and what's real or not real. This 5 book, each one stand alone and brings a unique style of storytelling. And if you ready to unmask these heroes with me, see this video. So I have to start with the top of this genre and one of my favorite books of all time. Even after 35 years, Alan Moore and Dave Gibson Watchmen. As you can see here, it's a 3D version of the cover that is so cool. This book is actually like really interesting because this is the only book in 100 book greatest novels of all time in the New York Times list. And there's a really good reason for that. To really get Watchmen, you have to know about its background. It was written during the Cold War when people were deeply afraid of nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union. Alan Moore had total creative freedom to write a 12-issue series that is now a totally graphic novel that would change the comics forever. The story starts as a murder mystery. A retired hero called the Comedian is killed, but the things quickly get much bigger. What makes Watchmen so great is its characters. They are complex and serve as a clever satire on the perfect heroes from DC and Marvel. Moore shows that even good actions can be driven by personal or group interest, not just pure motives. These characters don't wear masks because they have noble goals. They do it because of the past traumas and some really interesting interest that you're gonna see in the story. They're trying to feel their emptiness inside themselves. There's Rorschach, a vigilante who sees the world in black and white and believes his mask is his real face. And as you can see on the cover, he's here. Rorschach, that the name coming from the Rorschach pattern of the psychology. There are politicians who decided people's fate without much thought. The comedian sees life as a bitter joke, and then there's Dr. Manhattan, one of the most interesting characters that ever written in a comic book. A godlike figure who could save the world easily with just 2 moves. But instead, he feel isolated and alone and distant from all the humanity because no one can truly understand him. He's way better than humans and he can't connect with them. It builds one of the most shocking ending in literature history, leaving us alone in its harsh world with terrifying questions. What is the price of a life in a world of gods and heroes? If you love fantasy and heroism, you absolutely cannot miss this masterpiece. It's one of my favorites of all time. And it totally changed the way of storytelling in comic books forever and make the tone for the comic book way more serious. And it has a movie adaptation that Zack Snyder made. I'm not suggesting that, but if you like the book, you should watch the movie. It's visually stunning and totally worth your time. I think the biggest difference between the book and the movie is that the movie by Zack Snyder is actually glorifying these heroes and kind of feel like he was a big fan of the book, so he made these figures in his mind way better and bigger than they really are, because the book is actually against that thought and the movie is actually glorifying them. So that's the biggest difference and the reason that I think book is way better than the movie and you should actually read the book. And let's go to the second choice. So our next book, we are going from global politics to American suburb. It's The Vision by Tom King. One of the most intimate story that ever written for Vision. Fun fact, this book actually inspired the famous TV show of WandaVision. So you know you are here for a good treat. Here's some background about Vision if you never watch any of his movies or comic book before. Vision is a synthesized android made by villain Ultron to destroy the Avengers and world. But he turned against Ultron and actually loved humanity. So joined the heroes and destroyed Ultron. In this story, Vision wants to be a human. So he created a synthetic wife and two teenagers, and they all moved to suburbs of Washington DC. And there you actually see how funny this comic book is. You see how much the family wants to be normal. There's a great scene where they go to a restaurant and order food to act normal, but like they can't eat, so they just sit there and look at the food and then pay for it, obviously, just to feel like a regular family. But this is a Tom King book that if you know, you know. It means that quirky humor, funny setup, gonna be going for an absolute tragedy because it's disconnected from the huge crossover events of the Marvel. This is a one-shot comic. There's no useless stretch of like plot or other characters. This is hugely focused on these characters. It's a really tight, brilliant narrative. It starts by making you laugh and confusing you by like what's happening, but it promises a real tragedy at the end. Thanks to the son of the Vision, obsession with Shakespeare, the comic elevates itself to a passionate, poetic, and tragic level that rivals what Alan Moore did with Watchmen. It featured deep philosophical discussions about whether gods and the soul actually exist. Discussions so profound that even the agnostics among us will begin to doubt their own doubts. It is a stunning sci-fi reflection on lost love, grieving, and what it truly means to be human from an android point of view. I totally recommend this book. It has high rating and superly loved by everyone. So let's go to the third book. For my third choice, we are sticking with Tom King, but now in this universe. Heroes in Crisis, as much as the last book from the Vision book was a grounded story, this one I remember advertised as this big event for all the heroes in DC that's gonna have a really important effect on them. But the interesting thing here is this story actually super grounded, and I'm gonna tell you why. So usually in DC Comics, when you hear word crisis, it means big event full of fights, different characters, but because of the limited number of pages, it actually never pays off that much because like there's no room for characterization of these heroes. But this one is the reason that I'm saying this one is different. This one is all about character development. Heroes in Crisis is so different. It's one of the most personal, emotional, and darkest stories I've read in DC Comics. Tom King, the author, used to work in CIA. So he knows a lot about PTSD and the effects of trauma. The premise is brilliant. How do superheroes cope with horrific things they see and do? Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman makes a super secret rehabilitation place named Sanctuary and Psychology Center that is run by AI, designed specifically to treat superheroes suffering from trauma, much like a hospital for American veterans. People usually see superheroes smiling, winning, standing tall, but they never think about the agonizing pain of living with that much violence, or what it feels like when a teammate or your best friend, as we know how they work in superheroes stories, killed in action. This book is the most humanizing stories of these gods we've ever got. There is a moment in the book that I love. Is when Superman addressed the public. He tells them, you shouldn't be afraid that your heroes are going to a place to show their emotion and talk about their brokenness. It doesn't make them unworthy, it actually makes them more worthy than ever. They break just like normal people, but the fact that they ask for help makes them better, more trustworthy people. That's what this story is really about, having the courage to ask for help, sharing your feeling without fear, and starting to heal. The ending was controversial in this book, I have to say, but if you get the story main message, it fits perfectly, even it's not suiting the bigger world of DC. So for our fourth entry, let's go back to the Marvel with the title Marvels by Kurt Busiek and feature stunning. When I'm saying stunning, it's like nothing like this by Alex Ross. So in other comics, we saw the perspective of gods and heroes between the normal people. But this comic actually asks how is it to live as a regular person in the world of gods and monsters and heroes. And it's super interesting. I think it's one of the most different comic books that ever written. So, in the Book of Marvels, rather than following the normal heroes, we are following a normal newspaper photographer. Through his camera lens, we watch the history of Marvel Universe unfold. From 1940s to 1970s, we are on the street level when the first heroes appear. We look up at the sky through when the Fantastic Four battling the world-ending threats. For Phil and other people, superheroes are more like force of nature than normal people. The book does a great job showing how society reacts, moving from total awe to admiration to fear and even hatred. How our culture, our politicians, and our self worth would change if we had to share the planet with Marvels, combined with Alex Ross's photorealistic art that are all hand painted. You should see them, it's beautiful. It makes these fantastical characters feel incredibly grounded and real. It is a beautiful, awe-inspiring book that looks at the superheroes genre purely through the lens of humans. Finally, here's a book that threw the whole superhero idea into the real world. It's Kick-Ass by Mark Millar and John Romita Jr., one of the most famous artists in the comic industry. The idea of this book is something every comic fan has thought about it before. A lonely young man named Dave wants to fix the world in his own way. He buys a suit online, puts a mask, calls himself Kick-Ass, and goes to looking for crime. He's trying to make the world a better place in his own way. But this book has a twist. It's happening in kind of reality, so the reality is brutal. The reality is not forgiving him for his mistakes. So what happened is he going out to beat up some criminals, but he's the one that getting beaten up and almost dying. But the funny part is his video that someone got in a street of him fighting those criminals is actually like going online and getting viral in YouTube and Facebook and suddenly become a massive celebrity in town. He soon discovers he isn't the only one doing this. He meets Red Mist, another kid with a costume and no power, and Hit Girl, a terrifying 12-year-old girl with little martial arts skills, raised by a gunman father that was working for military before, that named himself Big Daddy. Mark Millar's writing is fun, fast, and witty, but there's a dark side to it that comments on today's world. He shows exactly where superhero fantasy stops and the harsh reality of real life is coming. John Romita Jr. that has an intense art that matched the story perfectly, balancing the idea of the kids in costume with the gritty realism. And there's a movie adaptation of this book too. And if you've seen the movie, you should know the comic is very different, especially when it comes to Hit Girl's father, reasons for what he does. The movie made him more acceptable for a wide audience. Put aside what you think, this book is a bold, violent satire on the Marvel and DC heroes that I loved it in the recent rereading. I totally suggest that. So here you have it, 5 totally different graphic novels. Watchmen first deconstruct the morality of power, then The Vision turns the quest for humans' normalcy into a Shakespeare tragedy. Heroes in Crisis use the genre to explore very real weight of PTSD and the power of trauma. And Marvel shows us the awe and terror of living in the shadows of gods. And Kick-Ass brutally showing the reality of putting a mask and going out to save people. This book shows that superhero stories aren't just for kids or fun stories. They can be really, really deep and really dark. The genre is flexible and deep, able to explore the darkest, most complex, and most beautiful part of being human. I really encourage you to check at least one of them from your TPL, because I believe TPL has all of them. Thanks so much for joining me today. Happy reading.